Good afternoon, dear participants. Next, you have a panel discussion with two highly interesting persons.
Would you like to present yourselves and your project as well?
Sure. Yes, I'm Peter, and working on the Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel. So basically, this Finest Bay Area project that we're doing, and then involved with a few other things as well. So I've been kind of like an entrepreneur all my life, I guess I could say. So involved with a few things here and there, but the main thing being the tunnel project right now.
And my name is Kustaa, Valtonen, working with Peter on the tunnel project. We've been doing that for 4 years now, and pretty far. It's taking like 100% of my time, and the other 100% goes with the startups, which is a passion.
How long have you had this project going on with Finest Bay area?
So we've been working now on the tunnel project for like 4 years, and making kind of like steady progress. So there's a lot of work kind of like in behind the scenes. So a lot of work with the various authorities, various people on the public side. So both in Finland and Estonia. So working with the kind of like the national governments, and then also regional and local like city governments. So there's a lot of that, because we're talking about like a massive infrastructure development. So a lot of let's say activity and contacts on that side, and it's you learn new things every day. So it's been kind of like a learning by doing experience as usual, and that's of course always the best way to learn is to do.
Yes, great. Can you tell more about the process of the project and pulling that out?
Yeah. Well, it's pretty straightforward. So we have a tunnel 103 kilometers long. Actually, 2 tunnel pipes. It's going to be the world's longest undersea tunnel, connecting the airports of Tallinn and Helsinki-Vantaa on the Finnish side. And we're basically doing a lot of social media as well.
Yeah, why not?
We're basically going to use tunnel boring machines to bore the tunnels. And once the boring starts, we start to get a lot of rock from underground. So we use the rock to construct an artificial island in the middle of the Baltic Sea or the Gulf of Finland. And that's going to be about 3 to 5 square kilometers of size. So wow. It's a major piece of architecture.
That's huge.
And once the tunnel is bored, it's about 2.5 years. We'll be installing high-speed railway into both of the tunnels. One cargo, one passenger traffic, and travel time about 20-25 minutes end to end. So that's kind of the goal. Then there's millions of little detail, some a little bit larger, zoning, financing, technical things, and so on. But it's more or less a very structured project.
Yeah. That basically the tunnel, I mean, okay, it's a 15 billion euro infrastructure development, so pretty big, or actually really big. But then what is very important is that the tunnel is just kind of like a detail in kind of like the big picture. And of course, I mean, tunnels and infrastructure, that's not like super exciting. But what is super exciting is then what the tunnel development enables us to do. So we're bringing 2 capital like cities together, so Helsinki and Tallinn. So the metropolitan area becomes one. So we have the opportunity really to create a significantly bigger talent density and a much bigger like metropolitan area. So we're talking about 2 million people currently if we look at the Helsinki region, Tallinn region. So that's kind of like the size of take Stockholm, Amsterdam, or something like that. And I think that 2 million is typically used as kind of like a critical mass for then really start accelerating things. And from my perspective, this is kind of like continuing the work that was started way back with things like Slush, and then the various like startup communities and the ecosystem that's been popping up here in Finland and also in Estonia and around our universities. And I think that what we're really looking at is that we're creating gravity. So again, we need more talent. And now building the tunnel, bringing the two cities, the two metropolitan areas into one, I think that we're creating a very, very interesting environment. And always believed in enabling these things to happen. So the tunnel is really like an enabler of the future growth. And right now we're also, as part of that, looking at attracting a lot more students from kind of like all over the planet to Finland, to Estonia. So looking at increasing the number of foreign students at our universities to 150,000, 40,000 for Estonia. And of course, and you guys should know that I mean, that's where then kind of like the future is coming from. So young people, creating new innovation, creating new startups. And I think that we can be very proud of the fact that if you look at our area, so this finest Bay Area, and okay, finest because Finn and Est, so it's
But
not
also,
something that we say that it's the finest. It's actually facts based. So
Yeah.
Finland provides the Finn, and Estonia provides the Est, so finest. But we have the highest density of unicorns anywhere on the planet. So and we're very proud of our friends in Estonia. I mean, we have 1.3 million people in Estonia, 4 unicorn companies. So you have Skype, way in the back, way back when, and Playtech actually was the first one, and then TransferWise and Bolt that has been in the news recently because they just raised a bit more funding, and they are now, I think their valuation is like 1.9 billion. So that's pretty good for 1.3 million people, 4 unicorn companies. So that's much higher than anywhere else in the world. So it's higher than Silicon Valley, higher than China, and I think that this is something that again we have a very good starting point, and that is something that now with the tunnel we want to enable more of that, accelerate, create gravity, attract more talent, and I think that also it's great to be here and look at some of the other enablers besides tunnels and all that, 5G and like all of that stuff. So it's interesting.
That's really interesting. Can you tell more about the economical effects on both societies, to Finland and Estonian, for employment and import and export, for example?
Yes, so 50 billion euros, that's it's a big project on its own already,
sure.
but and when you start to do the financial mathematics around that, we kind of see many aspects. So employment you asked for, basically we calculated that during the project we will be employing about 24,000 man-years in Finland and 6,000 in Estonia, so about 30,000 man-years altogether, kind of during the peak years of the project, about 5 years roughly. But then there's this rule of thumb that when you invest €1 below ground, it's about 10 euros investment above ground. And actually here in Espoo they have done, it was very recently released these numbers. So when they built the metro, Länsimetro, they actually found out that the investment €1 below ground is 15 above. So you can do the math yourselves that 15 billion euros times 10, we're looking at about 150 billion euro impact on investment side. And we have calculated the numbers on the gross domestic products of each country, Finland and Estonia. And we had to limit the Estonian part to about 10% of the whole investment because it's too much for the small economy. It's going to kind of overheat. And in Finland, we see that the impact will be kind of like not just fractions of a percent, but concrete percentages. And we will be about doubling the direct industry investments during the peak years of the project. So big impact.
It's a huge project.
Not too bad, but I mean it's something that we need, especially now with kind of like the ongoing crisis out there. We need these kind of massive infrastructure developments to basically get the economy going, and this is kind of like the best kind because it's private investment, so we're not even asking for any public funding. So the impact is massive because of that as well. That it's 15 billion investment into the Finnish and Estonian economy. So so it's been very interesting to then look at kind of like the effects. And we actually have also so Taloustutkimus, that's the biggest kind of like economic research company agency here in Finland. So they did a study where they benchmarked the Tallinn tunnel and then comparing it to the Öresund bridge, so connecting Copenhagen and Malmö, which is actually again similar like size of kind of like economic area, a metropolitan area. And after they completed the bridge that connects Copenhagen and Malmö, what happened was that roughly 20,000 people from Denmark, from Copenhagen, they moved to Skåne on the Swedish side and to the Malmö side because cost of living, you know, housing and all of that lower. And then at the same time, the unemployment in Skåne and the Malmö region was wiped out because everybody got employed in Copenhagen, higher salaries, shortage of talent. And we see the exact same thing here in Finland. That I mean, right now we have about 50,000 jobs that we need to fill in our tech industry. So there's the talent shortage. And at the same time, if you look at the difference between Finland and Estonia, cost of living, you know, salaries, everything, it's much bigger than the difference we have between Copenhagen and Malmö, you know, Sweden and Denmark. So currently there's about 50,000 Estonians who live and work in Finland, and less than 5,000 Finns that work or live in on the Estonian side. So once we have the tunnel completed, and we are talking about roughly 20-minute connection airport to airport, we expect actually tens of thousands of Finns to move to Tallinn, and we expect everybody in Tallinn to end up working in Helsinki, just because of the difference that we have in salaries, cost of living and all of that. So it has a huge impact also when we look at making both of our economies much more dynamic. So this is also very important, not only for Finland, Estonia, but actually all of us up here in the north and Nordic countries and Northern Europe, but actually all of the EU. So we need these kind of initiatives and this kind of leadership also now within the EU, so that we really are building a future for kind of like our young people, so all of you guys. So I think it's super important that we get this done and create the opportunities and make things a bit more dynamic.
If we look at the project from the Hack the Mall 5G perspective, it's there's like tens and tens of different approaches. So one is this number of people actually transporting themselves through the tunnel. 50 million people we estimate that to be. So that's a challenge on the networks on its own already. But when you add that the train is going, like Peter said, 20 minutes end to end, but that means that it's going to be traveling at 350 to 400 kilometers an hour. So that's something to consider. And below ground, the bedrock is very solid here, so we have finest granite in the world, and will be about 200 meters below ground in the middle of the Baltic Sea. So many aspects to consider.
Yeah, and I think one thing also, or a couple of things. So if you look at kind of like now the tunnel connecting Helsinki and Tallinn, initial reaction from many people is that okay, but hey, like Helsinki and Tallinn not exactly like the biggest cities on the planet, and how do you think that this will be economically viable, because we're talking about like 1.5 million people on the Finnish side, and then about 500,000 or so on the Estonian side. So if you compare to say London and Paris, and everybody knows what the channel tunnel, big difference is that yes, of course London and Paris are bigger cities, but also if you get on the train now in London and then you end up in Paris 2.5 hours later. So it's actually the train ride from London to Paris is already longer than ferry ride between Helsinki and Tallinn. And now we're talking about reducing the travel time from currently like 2 hours by ferry to roughly 20 minutes end to end. So it's a very different type of connection. So it's more like a metro. It's not like a city to city. It's not like an intercity. It's actually like intra-city, intra-metropolitan area connection, and that's why traffic numbers currently by ferry we have about like 10-11 million people going back and forth between Helsinki and Tallinn. But now we're looking at increasing that to more than 50 million, and the reason there is that we're really talking about a metro type of connection, and most of this will be again people living in Tallinn, working in Helsinki, and of course over time the differences will kind of like even up, and that's how it goes. But then another very important piece of the puzzle is that if you look at the airport now in Helsinki and where the growth has been coming, that's actually the superior like geographic location that we have here, that we are the closest neighbor of China, India, Japan. I mean, I get on a plane, okay, normal circumstances and like, not of course now during crisis, but like 7 hours later I'm in Beijing, 6 hours later I'm in Delhi, and so on. So we expect now the tunnel, first of all, we end up with one airport, 2 terminals, so Helsinki and Tallinn, 20 minutes in between. And we expect actually the traffic to grow from currently it's about 22 million passengers every year in Helsinki. I think it's 3 million in Tallinn. We expect that to grow to 70 million, like in the 30s. And that's just again looking at Istanbul, looking at Dubai. They're approaching roughly 100 million passengers a year, and they're also benefiting from like location and okay, some other things. But no reason why we wouldn't be able to compete again because of geography and all of that. So I think that we have a massive opportunity that we should leverage our unique location being right in between Asia and Europe. So I think that's something that's very important.
What do you think, which are the biggest challenges you're facing at the moment? The crisis, of course, but is there other...
The crisis is actually an opportunity. I don't think that's like also like now.
We're very used to working remote already, so it's kind of like, hey, this is easy for us. It's just forced all of our business partners also to be in video calls and working remote. So that's an easy one. There's many things happening at the same time, so it's about kind of how we manage everything to keep the whole project going in the right direction. So I think we have a question here.
Let's talk about how 5G could make use in your project. So we have some questions from our watchers, and the first one is, what kind of materials are you planning to use on the inside of the tunnel to ensure its durability?
We kind of hinted in that direction. So we have very solid bedrock granite, especially here on the Finnish side, and most likely the tunnel will be kind of unfurnished between the stations where possible, and the stations of course will look like any other metro or train station today, but
only more beautiful obviously, but better design and stuff.
Wonderful architecture naturally, but the Estonian side it's a little bit more complicated because there's like this clay type of material, so we need to use kind of these elements to make sure that the tunnel is keeping dry and insulated properly. So, and concrete, no. We have been looking at solutions where we can actually make the thickness of the concrete as thin as possible. And there's surprisingly many companies actually contacting us about these type of things.
There's a lot of innovation around materials, and I think that's also good to keep in mind that okay, now we're talking about 103 kilometers of tunnels, so like 2 tunnel pipes, and it will be the longest kind of like railroad tunnel. But that said, it's not kind of like unheard of, that people are building tunnels and railroad tunnels in particular. So if you look at China, where a lot of this has been happening last few years or last few 10 years, we're talking about 103 kilometers, but then one of our partners, China Railway Engineering Company, they have built over 18,000 of kilometers of railroad tunnel in China alone. So then adding like 103 kilometers is not like super like overwhelming task or anything like that. So that's perfectly doable. And also again, I mean, we are very fortunate that we have fantastic and very like hard bedrock most of the way. So that is actually very good. And then also what has happened, you know, like during the years, that the tunnel boring machines have gotten better. And right now we're looking at using 16 of these TBMs, so tunnel boring machines, and we will be boring in 8 directions at kind of like any given time. So basically 2 pipes and then 8 directions within those, and that means that we can then complete the boring in roughly 2 years. So it's actually very fast.
2 years.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's but that again, that we
There's
have
so many machines
you know,
boring in
start
the
here,
directions.
2 directions, island station, both directions, other island, 2 both directions. So so we're going in 8 directions any given time, and that again allows us to complete 103 kilometers of tunnel in just roughly 2 years. So it's very fast. But that was actually the case also with the Channel Tunnel back in the day. That took, the construction of the tunnel only took about 2 years. So it's not like that big of a deal actually time-wise.
Very simple actually.
Yeah.
The next question would be that why do you want to or need to use 5G in your project? And could you give some more examples? What kind of applications does 5G enable in this kind of project?
Yeah, I can give basically 2 examples. One when the tunnel is operational, of course we want a fluent experience throughout the tunnel. But as we've explained, the tunnel connects 2 airports, and kind of our vision is that there could be a possibility to change terminal without actually going through the customs. So there might be some interesting ways to use 5G applications for that. And kind of the identification methods, so it's you won't have a paper ticket, but it's nowadays already on your phone, but could it be your face or some other biometric way of doing that? So these could be interesting when the tunnel is actually ready. But we have identified a few use cases already for the construction time as well. And one of those is autonomous vehicles. So when the boring is happening, there's a lot of rock coming out of the ground, and we'd like to see electric autonomous vehicles handling the deliveries of or the transportation of the rock out of the tunnel, and the autonomous vehicles actually need the 5G.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a very interesting use case. Let's see if we can make that happen. I don't know if you have any other.
No, but I think that then again, of course, we want to have perfect like 5G coverage of the tunnel itself, all the station areas. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and they are well-defined areas. So then it makes perfect sense to have kind of like all the latest and greatest technologies. So so of course we'll have 5G coverage in all the station areas, above and below ground. So I think that's important. And then there's a lot of opportunity to make better user experiences with 5G. So again, we have less latency. So I think that there's a lot of kind of like cool new experiences that we can enable because of that. And I think that of course when you are the train ride from kind of like the Helsinki airport to Ülemiste, so the Tallinn airport, that will be like roughly 20 minutes. So it's not a very long journey, but then we should also keep in mind that then the journey continues. So you then can stay on the same train, and then you before you know it, you're in Pärnu, then you are in Riga, and then you go to Kaunas and then Warsaw. So the Rail Baltica connection is then basically connecting our tunnel to kind of like then rest of Europe, and I think that then we want to have, of course, 5G work perfectly the whole journey, and that's for working, being entertained, all of that. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity. And then we can kind of get into one of the following questions that I saw there. There was a question about
Somebody's been reading
putting like bike lanes into the tunnel, and we are making 2 tunnel pipes, and they're big pipes. So it's 17.4 meters in diameter. So there's plenty of room for, actually in one pipe there's the passenger traffic in both directions, and then we put the cargo, so the freight traffic in the other, so that we can move at maximum speed for both. But then that still leaves room for a lot of kind of like different utilities, so we can put power, data, water, these kind of things into the tunnel. But there's still also room for bikes. So we actually done some early designs now for bike lanes within the tunnel, and then the immediate question is that, oh, but hey, 103 kilometers that, like...
Who wants to be cycling in
darkness? So first of all, it will not be dark, but the other thing also is that, okay, we will only have 4 stations for the trains, and that is actually because we want to, again, really have a fantastic experience, that it's not, like a train that stops every minute and then it takes, hours to get there, but it's actually, okay, 4 stations, about 20 minutes end to end. But that doesn't impact, of course, how many stations and how many exits we have for the bikes and for the other vehicles that might go through the tunnel. So we will have, then opportunity, you could get on your bike here and then you could start heading to the airport. But then on the way, you can get out of the tunnel in like Leppävaara, Myyrmäki, these kind of areas that will be in between, where we are right now here in this Otaniemi-Keilaniemi area, and then the airport. So it might be that you just ride your bike for like 5-10 kilometers in the tunnel. But then here I think again with 5G and all of that, and with display technology, we all know how it's been evolving very, very fast, and now we can have screens like we have behind us and like what we see everywhere. They're not very expensive. So one thing here is that there could be, in the tunnel, and if you look at the bike lanes, I mean the walls could be all display. So then, maybe you have the most beautiful scenery, like on the planet, and okay, it's not real, but it's okay. So again, this kind of
there's no limit to
image of a dark tunnel might not be totally, accurate, and there's an opportunity there also to innovate and make that kind of like experience more pleasant. And then one thing maybe on the bike and like 103 kilometers, if somebody wants to do that, then you would probably use like electric bike and not like pedal. Of course you can pedal the whole way as well, but I think that again that's where we're looking for like more innovation, more ideas, and there's no reason why we couldn't have like pretty much anything going through the tunnel, including bikes.
That's true. Okay, next we have a couple of questions about the island.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is, what is your vision of services and activities on the island?
Mm-hmm.
And are you aiming specifically on high-end tourist resident segments?
How much time do we have?
We have, yeah. I mean, it's a
It's a big question. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, it's size of the island. It's between 3 and 5 square kilometers, and for people here in Finland, that's roughly
About
the size of
Lauttasaari.
Lauttasaari. So Lauttasaari is home of about 25,000 people. So here we're looking at double that density. So about 50,000 people living, working, studying on the island. So it's like a city.
Yeah.
And then I think that with kind of like all cities, that of course you want to have a good mix, like in any city. So it's not that okay, it's only a particular type of resident or a particular type of visitor. I think that like any city, you want to have a bit of everything. So you want to cater for many different needs. Then one thing that is also important that we have for all the station areas, including the island station, we're looking at of the whole like 50,000 population, we're looking at 20% or so being students. So we're also looking at attracting universities, both local but also then international universities to set up their European campuses at one of the station areas, and the island is no different. So I think that will also contribute to the diversity and the mix of people. Then on the island we'll also have 10,000 hotel rooms, so there is big let's say accommodation capacity, and this is also to address the fact that we have a shortage of hotel accommodation in both Helsinki and Tallinn. Yeah. And again, of course, now during the crisis, so it's different. But I think that once we get back to business, we will see the same. And then there's also
sports and games,
yeah, entertainment like arena.
We don't really use the word casino island, but
but that's also
something
come
like
up.
that.
Yeah. But definitely arena for seating 20-30,000 people. So that's also then adding to the traffic that we're looking at. The 50 million plus passengers every year. So of course we'll have sports, various superstars performing at the arena, so that is important as well. So lots of opportunity to create fantastic experiences at the island station.
Also the nature outside of Helsinki on the Baltic Sea, it's very delicate, and our team has been looking at the birds and diving and counting the fish and everything. So a lot of this type of work has been done so that we don't disturb the nature too much. And the main reason for the island is that it's technical. We need it for emergency exits, we need it for ventilation, all sorts of technical matters. And when we kind of start to construct that from the rock that comes from underground, it's a very kind of environmentally sensible thing to do, to put all the rock in one place, which is not far away from the tunnel dig. And we kind of ended up in this type of a solution that once we kind of build the island, it makes sense to construct something really meaningful. And one of the ideas we've also been playing with this is kind of, let's not lose the focus on the nature, so that we can build artificial reefs, so that kind of the birds and fish will also have the place to be there, and seals, and maybe we have like a happy bird island there.
And I think again it's important to really look at all the opportunities, and I think that it's very important to not rule anything out. So there's a lot of room for innovation, and already during the 4 years that we've been working on this, so we have come across a lot of let's say new ideas and new innovations. So one thing again, we think that for energy and that side, we want to make sure that the island is energy self-sufficient, it's food self-sufficient, so that is also like a very ambitious goal. And we're looking at geothermal, so that is again, we are kind of like boring a tunnel, but I think that you can also then use that to drill like super deep holes. So we have some plasma drilling technology that we've been looking at. How could we produce 10-kilometer deep holes in the ground, which can be then used not only to produce like heat but also like energy. So when you go deep enough, then you hit high enough temperature, so that becomes like a very interesting alternative. And then we're also already testing some AI-based technology to actually monitor all the time the project, but also like the island and the station development, so that we comply with all the 17 like UN SDGs. And I think that this is also like very important in a project like this, or actually any project that you really build everything in a sustainable way. And I think that is kind of like or it should be like a given, but it's kind of like always surprising how little is actually done. But there's a lot of talk about that of course, it's green and it's sustainable, but then that we actually really do that, I think it's super important. And then I also saw that there was easy question. So which one is more important, like the passenger or cargo? So actually, if you look at the business case, about 80% is passenger traffic, 20% is like the cargo side. So it's that's what it is.
And the island will be in the Finnish waters, so within Finland waters.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about the further connections of the tunnel? Will they be up to north or other directions?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, actually talking about islands. So I mean, Finland is de facto an island. So if you want to go anywhere from here, you basically have to fly pretty much. Okay, you can take the ferry, but I mean. It really is kind of like the way it is, and of course, I mean, you can cross the border to Sweden or Norway or Russia, but again, for most of the travel, we're an island, so that's also why if you look at the you know how much we fly per capita, Finland is actually way up there, along with like UK, which is also an island. So I think the Tallinn tunnel is important to remove this island status, and that is super important. But then, if you know, you look at you know, from a kind of like a Finnish perspective, you know, being an island and being economy that is totally dependent on like trade, the cross-border connections are the highest priority. And I think that kind of like from our perspective, yes, the connection to the south, Estonia, and then further to Europe, super important, and that's like the highest priority. But then the number 2 priority is then the connection to the east, so St. Petersburg, there's roughly as many people there, actually more people there than all of Finland. That is the number 2 priority, is then connect the tunnel, and there we could go on the Finnish side. There's 2 routes being discussed now for the connection to St. Petersburg, or then I think a very potential connection is actually Tallinn, Narva, St. Petersburg. And there we're looking at creating a connection that would be 1.5 hours Tallinn to St. Petersburg. And then of course we have the roughly 20 minutes and you're in
Ideally we'll have the finest Bay Area circle railway at some point, but that's going to take a few years. And looking up north, of course the Arctic Rail would be very, very important to build. And we have kind of started to look at that, but need to do this step by step, as Peter was explaining, that one priority at a time.
And then there's like how many new citizens do we expect because of the tunnel? I think that even without the tunnel, we'll have a lot of people that will move into the area. So we have huge shortage of talent in Finland. Mentioned already that just in the technology sector and in like the tech industry, there's 50,000 jobs that need to be filled. So that is one part. But then when kind of like that happens, typically also like another rule of thumb, that when you create these kind of like high value, high expertise like jobs, that always then creates 10 other jobs like around in various other areas of the economy. So if we are looking at 50,000 new jobs there, then that means that there's going to be 500,000 just around that will happen. So I think that if you look at the metropolitan area, and now talking about both Helsinki and Tallinn, and currently 2 million, I think that we're looking at adding more than 1 million people going to into the 40s, and that's also part of the kind of like regional plan here in the Helsinki area, in this Uusimaa area. It calls for 550,000 people by additional people by 2050. And I think that if you look at both Helsinki and Tallinn and the broader area, probably we're looking at 1 million plus people. So it's significant growth. But of course, this doesn't happen like today. It's talking about the next 20, 30 years. But I think that that kind of scale we're expecting.
We can tackle some of the questions. Some of these are kind of quick to answer. So, role of Tallinn in comparison to Helsinki Airport, of course, the size difference is significant, but we see them as one airport, but 2 different terminals of a single airport. They might have a different kind of role. Some is flying shorter distances, some is flying long-haul flights. So that's kind of the...
And also, I mean, when we talk about now 70 million passengers for the combined airport, that also means that at some point we will run out of capacity here in Helsinki, and then the Tallinn airport, there's plenty of room to grow. So there's currently 3 million passengers. So then if we grow both Helsinki and Tallinn, and then maybe both can handle 35 million. So then it makes sense to have that, and then also it's a nice kind of like backup that we remove kind of like one point of failure, kind of like so you have then if there happens to be bad weather in Helsinki, you can fly out of Tallinn. If there's bad weather in Tallinn, then maybe Helsinki is open. So I think that is also, especially now during the crisis, we have I think all realized how bad it is if we don't have the connection between Helsinki and Tallinn. So I think it's very good to add a bit more alternatives there.
Yeah.
What do you think about the impacts on Stockholm and Central Europe? Do you think?
Well, Central European connection, of course, very important through the Rail Baltic.
Yeah.
So that will kind of make flying less. So people will use more of the train, and it's not about. Very often we Finns end up looking at how we can get there fast, but it's about how the Baltic states people can come here and so on.
Yeah.
And the role of Stockholm, yes, of course, it kind of. We talked about kind of St. Petersburg and Tallinn, Helsinki forming a Bay Area, but Stockholm is just on the other side. So
yeah, so it's part of the area. So and I think that of course there is a lot of integration already. I think that Finnish and Swedish economies are probably one of the most integrated economies anywhere on the planet. Yeah. And I think when we win, Stockholm wins, and vice versa. So I think that is something that, of course, we want to do even more collaboration there. And I think, like looking at from a startup perspective, that Helsinki, Tallinn, Stockholm, we have a fantastic environment. I mean, there's many unicorns from not only Tallinn, but from here, from Stockholm. And I think that is kind of like unicorn per capita is a pretty good metric for also measuring part of like the health of the startup ecosystem. And I think that we're very close to the Stockholm ecosystem and the Swedish ecosystem. So again, win-win.
Maybe we do a tunnel to Stockholm when we complete.
Once we get the technology a bit better.
Because our time is running out, I think we should move to the questions about the challenge you have set to our participants. So do we have? No. Okay, then continue with the
question about 5G. That would also have to do with the challenge. What do you think? How 5G could help the services of apartments on the artificial island?
If we go back to some of the kind of principles we have for the design of the island, one of those is that it should be car-free because it's kind of compact. So there's still need for people to move, and they might have something to carry, and kind of the last mile logistics. Those might be something to look at from 5G perspective, what kind of needs there are. If there's a network of autonomous vehicles on the island, for example, and some sort of delivery robots maybe taking your groceries, or you buy something from IKEA, and how does it magically appear at your front door? Those type of things, but let your imagination fly. It's many possibilities there.
And then we have one question left. So since I'm not completely familiar with the Nordics countries and the area, what could be the comparison of area of Helsinki, Tallinn, Greater Boston area with 500,000 students?
Yeah, I've actually lived in Boston a couple of years, so it's not a kind of far-fetched comparison. Boston is also kind of like on the sea or ocean front, so very similar to Helsinki. But there's no connection, so the Helsinki-Tallinn kind of across the bay connection is very unique. There's no other capitals in the world which are so close to each other.
And we have like slightly higher population, I think, here if you look Helsinki, Tallinn and Boston area. depends on like
Yeah. How
which,
big
how,
of a circle you
why
make.
the circle, but I think in both cases. But of course, then I mean Boston area has some fantastic universities, but I mean we also have some fantastic universities here like Aalto and University of Helsinki and all of that. So I think it's a pretty good benchmark, and again what we want to really look at here is that we increase the student population. So I think that is something that from that perspective it's a good benchmark and good kind of like analogy to look at the greater Boston area. So that's definitely like works, and I think that we have an opportunity to really create something pretty spectacular over here, and also if you look at our part of the world, so besides like this fantastic geographic location being like right next to Asia and having fantastic connectivity, and then I think and that's definitely something that we have over Boston if you want to compare to Boston. So the location of course here is a bit easier, but then we also benefit from having best educational system on the planet. So not talking just about universities, but if you look at the basic education, all that. So that's one thing that we're known for here in Finland, also in Estonia. So that is actually a very good foundation for everything. And then of course we're proud of the fact that Finland has been ranked the happiest nation on the planet for 3 years running. So the happiness, I think that we can all agree with, and it's important, and now with all the craziness going on in the US, I think that at least we have stable democratic societies, we have sane political leadership. So I think that is one thing that we have over Boston and the US, that there's like at least a bit of sanity in our leadership. So that always like is good to have stability.
What about your project in Africa? I heard that you're doing
Yeah,
some
I
kind
can
of
talk
project there too, and I just got a question that there's
so
someone
that,
who would like to know about that
It's
too.
not yet in Africa.
But we are actually it is because we have people on the ground there, the local teams. But we started something called Ambitious Africa some weeks ago, but we've been working on that already a couple of years, but not like super actively. But now the crisis actually prompted us to kind of like accelerate and start doing more. So if you go to ambitious.africa, so that actually is the website, you can find out more. And the plan is to transform Africa, all 54 African nations, in next 5 years, looking at education, entrepreneurship, and entertainment. So this kind of like triple E model for transformation. And what is very important there is that we're bringing together Nordic ecosystem, the African ecosystem, the local young people, Nordic young people, and we have been now running these Ambitious Africa events in 15 countries already. We reached some 5,000 people all across Africa, and the plan is to do that now for all 54 African nations, and putting the young people in charge. So that is something that we've been very successful with here in Finland, and how the
You're
whole
a good example of that.
the whole ecosystem here has been kind of like built, and I think that this is actually when I kind of like share this, that okay, we're going to transform Africa like next 5 years, and okay, we've heard that before. Then I always kind of like share some stories about like how we made Slush happen here, and the whole ecosystem, and actually one story that I've been using is that we had 2014 there was this World Economic Forum summer meeting in Dalian in China, and then Jyrki Katainen, who was the Prime Minister of Finland, he was chairing a roundtable discussion about entrepreneurship, and we had ministers, Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister of the UK, we had business people, so the kind of crowd that you expect at the World Economic Forum meeting, and then Jyrki, our Prime Minister, was sharing the experiences of kind of like the startup ecosystem, the entrepreneurship here in Finland.
Yeah.
And then somebody asked him that, hey, like, how did you guys in Finland make this amazing explosion in startups and entrepreneurship? Like, how did you make it happen? And then, Jyrki Katainen, Prime Minister of Finland, answers, I don't know. And he wanted to make the point, of course, that it wasn't the government, it was the young people, it was, this grassroots movement that made that change happen. Yeah. Through Slush, through the various entrepreneurship societies and Start North and these things that we have now. And I think that this is very important, and that's exactly what we're doing now as part of like Ambitious Africa, that we are putting the young people in charge and they are making the change happen. And I think that this is very important, and that's also where this collaboration, Nordic and Africa, comes into play. That it's a very different way of doing things, and that's what Ambitious Africa is all.
Maybe we should hack them all in Africa as well. So.
Yes, so we're talking about that we could, you have this fantastic studio here, so why not?
Yeah.
So maybe we can do some Ambitious Africa events. But yeah, everybody, you should go and check out ambitious.africa, and you can then see for yourself what it's all about.
Yeah.
Definitely,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you so much. I think we're
Running out of time.
Yeah.
but
Hey, but
thank
this was
you
great.
very
Hey,
much
thank
for
you,
visiting
thank
us,
you.
and
This was
thank
great
you
to
for
be
the
here.
answers.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.